The wind was the only thing that kept me company that morning. It came whispering across the sagebrush, soft as a woman's breath, and just as hard to forget. I've been riding alone near 3 years by then, keeping to the quiet trails, far from folks and farther from memories. My horse Buck knew the rhythm of my silence. We'd camp near the dry creek beds, eat cold beans, and watch the horizon burn itself out come sundown. There's a kind of peace in being alone long enough that even your ghosts grow tired of talking. But peace ain't the same as living, and I reckon I'd near forgot what living felt like. Till that day the stagecoach rolled into Sutton Crossing, bringing her. The wheels screeched in the dust, scaring a dog off the porch of Miller's saloon. I remember standing there, leaning on a hitching post, hat low against the glare. And then I saw her, stepping down from that coach like the first breath after a long drought. Her name was Faith. City look about her. Boston, maybe. The kind that don't last long under desert sun. She tripped on her skirt a bit, near lost her balance. Before I knew it, my hands were on her arms, steadying her. And Lord help me, I said the first fool thing that came to mind. "You're mine now," I whispered. Didn't mean it to sound like that. Half a joke, half something truer than I dared. Her eyes met mine, startled, soft, unsure. Then she smiled just a breath of one and said, "Only till I find my footing, cowboy." And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me, like the land itself paused to listen. The town took to her quick. A new schoolteacher, they said, full of hope and letters and clean ways. But me, I kept my distance, watched her from the edge of things like a thirsty man refusing water he don't deserve. Still, the desert has its ways of drawing folks together. One evening, I found her standing by the corral fence, hair caught up in the wind. She was humming low, some song that didn't belong out here. Too tender for a land of dust and iron. "Ah, hard to find beauty out here, she said when she saw me. I told her, "Depends on where you're looking." And for the first time in a long while, I realized I was speaking more to myself than her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every coyote cry felt like her voice trailing off into the dark. And I thought about that whisper I'd let slip. "You're mine now." Maybe it wasn't a claim. Maybe it was a prayer. The next morning, I rode out before sunrise just to clear my head. But no matter how far I went, the sound of that stagecoach lingered, and her eyes stayed with me like the scent of rain before it falls. Sometimes a man don't choose the moment that changes him. Sometimes it just steps off a stagecoach, looks up at him, and smiles. It's strange how a single look can follow a man through the years. I rode into that memory more times than I care to count. Every time the sun dipped low, every time the sky burned the color of her hair. Faith came to town with light in her eyes and a secret she carried quiet. Didn't take long before I saw the weight behind her smiles. Boston had left marks on her, same as the war left mine. We were two souls patched together with silence, hoping the world wouldn't notice where we'd torn. I'd bring her fish from the creek now and then, or fix a loose hinge at the schoolhouse door. She'd thank me with that careful voice, polite, grateful, but distant still. I kept coming, not because I needed thanks, but because her presence made the air feel different, less empty. One evening, she asked if I'd stay for supper. Said she had more stew than one person could finish. The cabin smelled of herbs and dust, and the firelight made her look softer than I'd ever seen. We talked. about books, about the East, about the way the West swallows a person whole if you let it. And after a spell, she asked, "You ever been in love, Mr. Sutton?" I laughed low. "Once," I said. "Didn't end the way I figured, huh?" Truth was, it ended in blood and fire, far from any church bell. But that wasn't something I wanted her to carry. She nodded slow, like she understood without needing the words. Then she looked at me and said, "The past has a long reach out here." I remember answering, "Only if you stop writing." That night, when I left her cabin, I heard her humming again. Same tune from the corral fence. It followed me down the trail, like a promise I wasn't brave enough to claim. Weeks passed. Folks began talking about us, about what it meant that a man like me spent time with the teacher. Didn't bother me much, till the old name Shiloh came whispering through the saloon one night. That word, it cut deep. A battle I tried to bury under miles of dust. Men I'd lost. Mistakes I'd made. Garrett, the rancher south of the river, was the one who said it. He had a way of digging into a man's past like a dog after bones. Said I'd shot a boy who never lifted his rifle. Maybe I had. War don't give you time to count the sins right. But he said it loud, for her to hear. And when I saw the look on Faith's face that night, something inside me broke quiet. She didn't ask if it was true. Didn't need to. Just said, "You've carried it long enough, haven't you?" I nodded. We sat outside her cabin till the stars came out. Didn't speak much. Sometimes silence tells the story better than words ever could. Later she laid her hand over mine, light as a breath. Said, "No one's past should decide who they get to be tomorrow." And that was the first time I felt the weight of forgiveness, not as mercy, but as belief. That memory, it won't fade. It clings to me the way moonlight clings to the mesas, quiet, steady, eternal. And I reckon deep down, that was the night I began to love her for real. Not because she was soft or kind, but because she saw the parts of me I tried to kill and didn't flinch. Trouble don't always ride with a banner. Sometimes it comes quiet, like a cat in the dark. And by the time you hear it breathe, it's already got its claws in you. I was mending fence along the south draw when I saw dust lifting off the flats. 3 riders. Too straight in the saddle to be drifters. Too clean to be cowhands, putting in an honest day. I felt my ribs go tight, the way they used to before a volley at Shiloh. They didn't speak when they reached my line, just eyed the creek that cut across my range, low from summer and more precious than gold. One of them spat, said the river had always belonged to men with vision, which meant Garrett. I told him my deed was older than his ambition. They smiled like snakes and rode on. Didn't have to say the rest. A warning is just a promise with the sugar licked off. That night, I saddled Buck and made a slow circle of the place. Wind smelled of dust and cheap grass. Stars were so sharp a man could bleed looking at 'em. I kept thinking of Faith, the lamplight in her window, the soft scuff of her step as she moved about her little room. I wanted to ride there, tell her everything. But a man with old ghosts don't bring new ones to a woman's door. Dawn broke mean. I found the north gate cut and tracks running like a river of hooves. Rustlers had bled a dozen heading to the hills. I followed, moving fast over broken rock and cedar shade, till the country rose into shelves of red stone. The first shot clipped a chip from the boulder by my ear. The second tore my sleeve and warmed my arm with blood. I rolled behind a slab and answered with 2 quick fires. Dust leapt from a hat brim 30 yards out, and a man cursed my name like he'd been saving it. Shiloh came back then. The roar, the smoke, the faces I can't forget. My hands shook till I told them they wouldn't. Sometimes you got to boss your own body like a stubborn horse. They broke after a while, not eager to die for Garrett's thirst. I rode home slow, light-headed and mad at the shake I still carried. Faith was waiting at my gate. She saw the blood and didn't say a word, just pulled me inside and set to cleaning the wound. Her hands were steady. Mine weren't. "Garrett?" she asked. I nodded. When she tied off the bandage, I reached for her without thinking. Her breath caught, and for a long moment we just stood in the hush. If the world had ended right then, I reckon I wouldn't have noticed. But the world didn't end. It caught up. Near midnight, the dogs went wild. A lantern arced through the dark like a comet and burst against the barn wall. Dry boards took flame in a roar that lifted sparks into the black, like 1,000 small souls ripping free. I grabbed buckets, and Faith grabbed another. We ran a chain from the trough, but fire is a fast, hungry thing, and my barn was old. When the roof came down, the heat shoved us back hard enough to steal our breath. Horses screamed. I still hear it sometimes when the wind crawls through the cottonwoods. We saved what we could. Weren't much. Sheriff Miller came at first light, jaw set. Said no one saw nothing. Said the men in the saloon were sudden careful not to remember. Said Garrett had a lawyer riding down from Pueblo with papers meaner than a dry year. "Water rights," he muttered, like the words themselves might draw blood. Faith stood beside me the whole time, soot on her cheekbone like a war stripe. When the sheriff rode off, she turned to me and spoke soft, the way a woman does when she knows a man is about to do the wrong thing for what he thinks is the right reason. "You're not alone in this," she said. I looked at the ruin of the barn, at the blackened square where my hay had been, at the scorched brands hanging melted from a nail, at the fine dust of ash drifting over the corral rails like winter. I answered, "because that's the only way you stay safe." She shook her head, slow, stubborn. "Zayn, I teach children to face their letters even when they're scared. I won't let the man She stopped there, swallowed. "I won't let you face this alone." I wanted to reach for her, wanted to let the words she nearly said cover me like rain. But I remembered the boy at Shiloh, the stories Garrett had sown, the way a town can turn if it smells smoke and scandal. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I told her to go, told her to pack, told her Boston might still have a place for a woman who believed in clean beginnings. Her eyes didn't water, they burned. "Cowboy," she said, voice low as thunder far off, "if you send me away, it won't be because of your past. It'll be because you're afraid of your future." When she walked down the path, I felt every step land in my chest. A man can survive a lot in this country, but surviving ain't living. And sometimes the past don't just catch up, it drags you backward by the throat. The days after she left came hollow. I'd wake before dawn just to listen for her kettle whistle, but the air stayed still. The schoolhouse stood locked, her curtains drawn. Sutton Crossing went on, same as always, hammers ringing, boots scuffing, folks speaking in half voices when I passed. Garrett had the run of the place now. He built fences where the land once breathed free. Men I'd known since the war started calling him Mister. And when the survey papers came, stamped clean with some judge's seal, they said the creek was his. On paper anyway. But paper don't know a thing about truth. And it sure don't hold water. I rode north for a spell, trying to outdistance what I'd done. The hills there are old, worn smooth by wind and sorrow. I camped by a dry wash, let the fire die slow, and listened to coyotes tell their sad stories to the moon. Every one of them sounded like her voice, breaking gentle. I told myself she was safe back east, that maybe she'd find a place with light and laughter, things I was never built to give. But deep down, I knew she wasn't gone from here, not yet. A heart like hers don't run from what's right. One night, I found a letter tucked under my saddle blanket. Ink smudged, edges torn from the ride. It was Faith's hand. Said she'd been staying with Widow Tally, refusing to leave till she'd stood by me. Said a lawyer from Boston, a man she'd known from her father's firm, was coming to town, bringing proof Garrett's deeds were forged. Meet me at sunrise, she wrote. Bring the truth with you, not the guilt. I didn't sleep a wink. At first light, I saddled Buck and rode hard for town. Frost on the grass, mist lifting off the low ground. It all looked like the world was holding its breath. When I reached the square, Faith was there, coat buttoned tight, hair pulled back neat. Beside her stood that Boston lawyer, pale as milk and twice as nervous, and across from him, Garrett, smiling with all his teeth. Sheriff Miller waited in between, thumb on his belt, ready to let the law speak or the guns do it if the law failed. Garrett held up a paper. This here, he said, makes the Sutton Creek mine. His voice carried like oil spilling across water. Faith nodded to the lawyer, who stepped forward with another document. This, he said, is the original charter, dated 2 years earlier. Sheriff Miller took it, squinted, then looked my way. Well, hell, he muttered. Looks like the desert just picked a side. Garrett's smile died slow. He reached for his holster. But I was already moving. Didn't draw him. Just stepped close enough that he could see the years he'd stolen in my eyes. Don't, I said, simple, quiet. He didn't. The sheriff took his gun, his papers, his pride. By noon, Garrett was gone, riding east, where men like him always go when the land's had enough of 'em. Faith and I stood in the dust after the crowd drifted. She looked up at me, eyes tired but clear. I told you, she said, no one's past should decide who they'd get to be tomorrow. I wanted to speak, to thank her, to tell her she was braver than any soldier I'd ridden beside. But the words caught, so I did what felt right. I lifted my hat, laid it over my heart, and said, You saved me twice, ma'am, once from the law and once from myself. She smiled, small knowing. Then she said something that near stopped my breath. Zayn, it ain't salvation I came for, it's home. And that was the moment I knew the road I'd been riding alone had finally led me back where I belonged. When the sun dipped low that evening, we walked the burned edge of my barn together. Smoke still lingered faint, mixing with the scent of sage. She reached for my hand, not out of pity but peace. I felt her fingers, warm and sure, and thought maybe the West wasn't made just for men to survive. Maybe it was made for love to learn how to stay. 2 winters have come and gone since that day in the square. The barn's been rebuilt stronger than before, with beams that still smell of pine and promise. There's a cradle by the window now. Faith carved the name, Lila, into the headboard herself. Letters neat and careful, like everything she touches. Mornings start with the cry of a hawk and end with the soft weight of her head on my shoulder. It's a quiet life, a good one. And sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the trough, I hardly recognize the man staring back. Not the ghost who hid from the world, but someone still bruised, still breathing, still trying. The land healed slow. Grass came back to the slopes, and the creek, our creek, runs true again. Each spring, Faith plants wildflowers along the fence line. Says color reminds her the earth can forgive, even after fire. I reckon she's right. She usually is. Every so often, the past rides through my dreams. Smoke, thunder, the taste of iron on my tongue. Shiloh, Garrett the barn, all of it comes back in flashes. But then I wake, and there's her hand in mine, warm, alive, pulling me steady into the daylight. One evening not long ago, I found her sitting on the porch, rocking Lila slow. The sunset was spilling gold over the valley, same color as the day I first saw her step off that coach. She looked up, smiled that soft smile of hers, and said, "You remember what you told me that day?" I laughed low and easy. Reckon I said something foolish. "You whispered, you're mine now," she said. Do you still believe that?" I took my hat off, turned it in my hands, felt the years between then and now settle quiet in my chest. "I don't figure anyone belongs to anyone out here," I told her. "The land don't. The sky don't. Not even love does us. We just ride beside it a while, if we're lucky." She nodded, eyes shining in the last light. "Then I reckon we've been lucky." I sat beside her, watching our little girl reach for the colors bleeding across the horizon. The desert wind brushed through the cottonwoods, whispering like an old friend who'd finally run out of bad news. For the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel the need to move, didn't need to chase or hide or prove nothing. The world was still, and I was still in it, whole, scarred, loved. Maybe that's all a man can ask, not to rewrite what's been written, but to learn how to read it gentle, to let the pain teach him where the peace begins. The fire's low now. Crickets have taken over the night. Faith's humming again, that same tune she carried with her from Boston, soft and steady, the sound of home. I'll sit a while longer, listen to the stars blink awake, and thank the dust for every lesson it taught me. And maybe love ain't about holding on. It's about learning to let go gentle.